Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I'm on chess.com's tactics trainer and going to do another set of 3 puzzles and simply share my thoughts along the way. So, in this first one, we're playing as white. Okay, well, I see the answer. Yes, I see the answer. Okay, this rook is unprotected, and this king is accessible along the c file. So we could actually land a fork with this retreating move, queen c1. Material is pretty much balanced with the pieces. The pawns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, black is up a pawn, but they have a hanging rook here that we could take advantage of. Yeah. Yeah, this is the answer. Some other quick thoughts that I had when I initially looked at the position, my eye kind of focused immediately on b7 because I saw this, but it's well supported. I saw this rook is kind of out of play. I saw this knight is out of play. And if there isn't something happening here, I kind of next then went to, I went to looking at the C file and giving some kind of a check. And I think lastly I noticed, oh, the rook is also on h6 unprotected. So this will be a simple one, a fork, and then just winning a piece. Okay, that was a pretty simple start to this group of 3. Let's try number 2. Okay. Huh. All right, well, first thing I'm noting is what exactly? There's an idea of the Horowitz bishops. With bishop c5, this threatens multiple mates. The most direct one with bishop c5 is queen f2. Game over. And how to parry that. If queen here, that would fall for queen takes knight, pawn takes queen, bishop h3, controlling the 2 light squares. See, when the bishop is playing here, it controls the light. This rook is covering all of these squares, so if I could somehow manage to guard these 2 light squares, bishop h3 would do that. So this is certainly an idea and a top candidate right away for me. Bishop c5, queen here, I'll take the knight and then play bishop h3. However, suppose bishop c5 and the queen defends f2 in a different way. Suppose queen to d2. What's the big idea then? Would it still be queen takes knight? I'm not so sure at that point, because the queen can block on g2 should bishop h3 happen. So bishop c5, queen d2, queen takes knight, pawn takes knight, bishop h3, there's queen g2. Something that she would do different from the d2 square than, or when compared to the e1 square. So queen e1 defends both f2 and this g2 square. Or excuse me, queen e1 only defends f2. Queen d2 defends f2 and g2. I still think that this is correct. Maybe I should be looking first at the more the checking moves, but I don't see really a good checking move for move number 1. You know, these squares are already covered well. Yeah, I'm not really seeing. I think that this is the first move, but I have to come up with something different for queen to d2. Bishop c5, queen d2. What would I do there? It seems like everything's covered when the queen gets to play to d2. Oh, you know what it is, probably? I'm seeing it now. It's important, I think, to take this knight immediately. If queen takes bishop, there's mate on the spot, the queen e1. And so that's going to force pawn takes bishop. And then, only after the knight has been removed, can we play bishop to c5. And how is this different? Well, this defensive move of queen to d2 can now be met with queen takes pawn right away. Bishop takes, pawn takes. This queen is immediately restricted to f3. If she ever moves for just a moment from defending here, I could take here immediately with check. And I think that that's going to be decisive. Bishop takes knight, pawn takes, bishop c5. And how are you stopping queen to f2 mate? Queen d2, we take the pawn with check. This then forces queen to f2, and then we take the queen. So one more consideration. Bishop takes, pawn takes, bishop c5. Let's say the king bolts, king to g2. I'm pretty sure he's just going to get hunted down. And yeah, he will get hunted down. Bishop takes, pawn takes, bishop c5. Let me back up. Let's not get ahead of myself. Bishop takes knight as move 1. Pawn takes. Bishop c5, and suppose king g2, we immediately come over to the g file, knowing that if the king goes to the h file, we can play queen h6, game over. And if the king returns to f1, we still have this battery going on, queen f2, game over. So I believe that this is the key first move. It is. Now, only at this point, bishop c5. That's correct. And they are going for this variation. We have a check and mate next. Okay. All right. Yes, very tempting, and certainly important to know this tactical motif right here, where playing bishop c5, let me just bring up the analysis board right here. So this was the start position. Very tempting is this move, threatening mate right away, but queen d2 holds everything. Queen e1, not so much because of this, and then this, and that's game over. But queen d2 defends f2, defends g2, so this idea is no longer working because the queen can interpose on g2. But still something to be aware of for sure, these ideas. Bishop c5 threatens mate, and this mate in 2 threat if white is not careful with how exactly to defend f2. Okay, let's try puzzle 2. Playing as team white. This is my first thought, right here. Because it just pulls the king out, and also makes him more vulnerable to ensuing checks with queen d5, queen h5, rook f4. Is probably the first move. You know, these guys are not playing, really, the rook and the bishop. Given a move by black, there's not really a good check, so I have my eye on potentially a silent move as a first move, but I'm still looking at the most direct stuff of bishop takes pawn. King takes, as otherwise we're just taking a rook, and, well, right now black is up the exchange, but if we could win a full rook, that'll be sufficient to solve this. So bishop takes, king has to take. Where would we go from there? Queen d5 could be met with rook block. I don't really like that. Bishop takes king here. There's queen h5. I'm probably heading in the right direction with that one, because that places a pretty strong restriction on, or limits black's responses in a great way, because I'm eyeing up that rook. If I did some silent move, let me just maybe touch on this real quick. If I made a move like rook f4, or queen f3, or queen h5, I think black is given this one moment to say, you know what, I'll give some material up just to parry the threat against f7, and I'll do that by playing rook e6. And it basically kills the light square attack. So I think that these silent moves are just not working. It's worth mentioning, yes, this bishop is hanging, but it is protected indirectly. If it was black to move, queen takes bishop is met with this bishop takes, and then I take the queen. So I'm ruling out these silent moves as the first move. And I'm still focused on this as the first move. I believe it will be the correct start, but I need to see it through to its end. Chop chop. Where to go from there? Rook f4 I don't believe amounts to anything because of king g8, and then what would be the great follow-up there? Oh, okay, hang on. I'm seeing something with the f8 square right now. I'm seeing this idea where when the rook plays to f4, there's an idea where if the black king returns back, tries to run away to the 8th rank, rook to f8 will be mate if this rook goes elsewhere. So, for example, bishop check, king here, queen d5. Should rook e6 be played? Then we have rook f4. This might be exactly what happens when the computer plays through, when we see the answer. I think we'll have this variation, actually. Bishop takes, king here, queen d5, rook e6. We have then rook f4 check. And if the king goes to e8 or g8, it's rook f8 mate. If the king goes somewhere else, like, well, where would he go? With the queen on d5, the rook on e6, and the king on f7, rook f4 check. Doesn't have very many options. In fact, he only has one option. Aside from the back rank squares, which we have covered because of rook f8, his only other option from f7 would be to go to g6. But then we can play queen f5 check, knowing our rook is on f4 at this point, queen f5 check, king h6, and then finally rook to h4 mate. Bishop check, king here, queen d5. I have rook e6 covered. Is there something else to consider? I don't think so. I think we're going to have that same mating pattern if the king comes out right away. Bishop check, king here, queen d5. If the king steps up, we have the rook coming over and giving check to whatever square the king comes to, and basically walking over and mating the king as he goes to the h-file. So I think that this is it. And we'll probably see the variation where the king goes to the back rank. We'll find out. That is correct. Queen d5. Nice centralization, and it's important that it takes away this g8 escape square. Okay, so the king is going in this direction, and now we have a mate in a few. Let me just make sure. I see a mate in 3, or 4 at least. Is there something faster? Rook g4. If king here, queen g5 is mate. There's rook g4 if the king comes back here. We have rook f4, queen f5, rook h4, mate. Is there something faster is the only thing I'm questioning. Let's see. I don't really think that there is. I'm going to go with rook g4. Yeah, that'll lead to the mate. Let me just bring up the analysis board to show a variation that I was talking about here. So we started here. Chop, chop, queen check. If the rook blocked, they're vulnerable on the back rank now after rook f4. King here or king here will be met with rook f8. And, well, in the final position, the king went here, check, and then the problem was solved. But if he's going here, that would be mate. And if he's going here, is there something faster? I'm not really seeing it, if there is. Yeah, I think it would just be rook f4, queen f5, and then rook h4. Okay, let's try one last one. See if we could go 3 for 3. Team white. It's probably a mate. How exactly to mate? Given time, if it is black to move, there are no checks. I'm not thinking about winning pieces in this type of position. I see that the king is currently only having these two squares as safe squares. Okay, so actually what this means, one way that I'm looking at this right now is if I could teleport the rook to e6. This might not be a bad way to think about things. If you could get the rook to e6, that's mate. This rook right here, it's important that this rook is cutting off these fifth rank squares, but this guy here, if he could somehow get to e6, that's game over. Giving check, and he stops king to e7. So, having said that, this is maybe a start with rook to f1, but I'm already going to scratch that, actually. Because, why? Well, there is bishop block, and then he's just a long way off from contributing. How about just the one quiet move? Yeah, that's what it is. It's just a straight shot to the e6 square, huh? How do you like that? Yeah, this is a mate in 1, 2, 3. A mate in 3. Huh. Yeah. Okay, so just factoring in this idea where black doesn't have anything, even if it was their move, they're not able to hurt you. There's no mate threat against white. There's not even a checking move against white. If we could somehow get the rook here, and we can, I think the first move is just going to be rook to e1. And the only way to stop rook here, mate next, is to play bishop d5 defending, or bishop here blocking. If bishop bishop d5 or bishop e4. Bishop e4 we just take, and then here next is mate. And if bishop here, well, there's two ways we could take, but I believe best will be to take with this rook. Taking with the bishop, this allows king takes pawn. We want to keep this position as is with the bishop and pawn. So I think that we're just going to have rook here, and maybe it'll already say that the puzzle is solved. Not quite sure. I'm just double checking rook to e1, bishop d5, rook takes, and there's no way to parry. Rook e6, mate next. Yeah, that should be it. Okay, they are taking it further, and they're just blocking. Okay. And they're just going to play it out. Okay, not bad. Okay, so not the most difficult set of three that I've encountered, that's for sure. But as usual, feel free to share how you did with these three in the comment section below. And as usual, I hope you got something out of it and you're having a good day. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.